If you think prices are going to go lower, I want you to sit down. If you think they're going to go higher, I want you to put your stand up and have your hand in the air. And if you think that they're basically going to go nowhere, I want you to just stay standing. So make your choice, including you four, now. Oh yes. Oh, okay. Okay, so the majority think prices are going up, as does Mr. Jellyfish. Sorry.
Paul.
How dare you? And, right, you can all sit down. Thank you very much. Right, okay. So, chaps, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell me, and we'll start with you, Paul.
Yeah.
No. Do you agree with the majority or not? So the majority think that prices are going to go up.
Yeah, my name's Paul Brannan. I work for Jellyfish Energy. We are a direct gas and electric energy supplier.
Less of the sales pitch, just get on with it. Now, we talking majority or going with the majority or...
Yeah, I think the majority, obviously, in terms of the energy market, no one actually knows where it's going. There's so many different factors out there that have an impact. It wouldn't have surprised me if it was 50-50.
Okay, next.
I'm Andrew Crabtree. I run the optimisation desk at Empower Business Solutions. We are a route to market for flex customers, and we do some risk management as well. I
keep saying no sales pitches, everyone. Blimey, does anyone listen to me?
That wasn't the pitch. I'm disinclined tentatively to agree that prices are going to go up. I think we've seen a real shift to the sort of higher ranges where I expected prices to be currently. I'm cautiously optimistic around the Russia question, or Russian gas question.
We'll come on to the reasons. I just want to get... Okay, next.
Hi everyone, Ryan Jarvis, Senior Analyst in the supply team at Shell Energy UK. Again, very tentative answer because there are so many factors at play, but I would say I tentatively disagree, hence me sitting down.
Very good. And you stayed up.
Yeah, so Simon Gill, so I head up pricing planning strategy at British Gas. I was in the middle. Frankly, I can see it bobbling around constantly. It always bobbles around. I constantly struggle with a trade-off between commodity and non-commodity and what's the actual driver of underlying costs. Again, we'll probably explore it as we go along, but there's a few different moving parts.
You're nicking one of my questions now, you realise that. Okay, let's go back to you and why you think that you're sort of cautiously optimistic.
I think the biggest factor that's dragged markets around over the past 6-9 months is the question around continuation of Russian gas through Ukraine. And it feels very much like the transit agreement that was due for expiry in 2019 that was continued. I know we're in a very different situation, and I think depending on who you talk to, there's either base case of there being zero gas or base case of being continuation of gas. I'm erring on that side, and it takes some risk out of it. Yeah.
Okay, and we'll go into... I'm going to ask what's going to mess up your forecast later, so we'll come on to that.
Okay.
Paul, you thought prices more likely to go up?
Yeah, just in terms of what the geopolitical crisis are in and around the world, obviously Ukraine and Israel having a massive impact on markets. You kind of stole my bit. I was going to say a little bit as well. But yeah, in terms of price rising, obviously just seasonality as well. In terms of obviously coming into the Christmas period, people using more energy, etc. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't want it to obviously rise as it has done, but prices do seem to be on the rise at the moment.
I'm going to come to you. You mentioned non-commodity. One of the isn't the issue that basically energy costs are not really energy costs anymore?
Yeah, I mean, completely. Commodity makes up, somewhere around 40 to 60%, depending whether it's electric gas for a lot of the businesses. Non-commodities increasingly more. In electricity, it's going to get more, I'm sure. We are hearing the news a lot. We need to build pylons. We need to connect all this renewable energy. That's not going to get it any cheaper. We know there's going to have to be some significant investment in the country in order to be able to hit our net zero ambitions. So chances are it's going to go up. The question is, how much have we already factored that into our price versus, potentially what will come out in future budgets or the industry strategy which Labour are working on right now. So some big questions around it.
So I'm going to talk from very much a sort of wholesale market perspective, and it's very much a view on risk in the market. The market has moved away from, over the last few years, pricing purely on fundamentals and instead on risk, as there's so much more risk in the curve now. So based on that, if the risks don't materialise or don't extend any further, it stands to reason that in the short term we should see a fall in prices. But the reason the risk premium is so high is because if something does materialise, the upside's huge.
This is where I get to ask one of my stupid questions. So we normally sort of have this sort of session here, and we're normally looking out to about 6 months. Can we go any further than 6 months, or is 6 months pretty much that? And I don't mind whoever wants to pick that up first.
I mean, we need to look beyond 6 months because, you know, most of the contracts which we sell probably in this room are 3 years.
Yeah.
Some of them will be delayed start as well. So you're going out to 27, 28, 29 in some cases, maybe more. So you have to have that longer term view. But obviously the longer you go out, the more uncertainty which comes into the market. You know, will there still be a war with Russia, Ukraine in 6 months' time? In 2 years' time? 4 years' time? I don't know. The market prices in a position, and we then reflect that position, but that's why it bubbles around so much, because there's so much uncertainty. And, you know, let's be honest, as a industry, it's a hard thing to forecast beyond, you know, tomorrow, let alone 5 years into the future.
I'm going to ask another stupid question, actually, even though I didn't give you a chance to answer that one. Unless you want to answer it now, but you talked about, who talked about risk? You talked about risk. So risk is really one of the big issues now, rather than anything else.
Yes. So following the start of the energy crisis, or maybe not quite the start, but the loss of Russian gas to Germany via the Nord Stream pipelines, the supply-demand mix is much more on a knife edge than it was a few years ago. And if there is insufficient supply such we have to curtail demand, then the price upside is huge. So there's risk asymmetry basically in the market, and therefore the risk premium rises on the curve, and you move, as I said, a little bit further away from fundamentals pricing and more into sort of a risk pricing scenario.
In terms of then looking longer, and you can tell I've not done this and have no idea. You're not meant to smile so quickly on that one, by the way. However, all the people here, they're almost expecting, you know, they're expecting that certainty. Is that a really tough thing to do, to give that certainty, or is it more a case of we go what we've got and then we make the changes accordingly if something happens? I mean, that sounds like a stupid question, but I'm going to throw it out there. Yeah, who doesn't want? No one wants to answer it. I love it.
Just in terms of obviously the risk that's gone on in the past, I think it's, you know, it's really got to be looked at in regards to what's happened, and obviously, you know, near forecasting, just making sure that we do adapt to things that could possibly happen, when unfortunately there's more things out there that could happen than obviously can't.
Okay, let's talk about the factors that are going to then mess up. So you two are thinking it's going to go slightly lower. You're sort of hovering it's around the same. You think it's going to go higher. Are you thinking it's going higher because, probably like the people here, that it's very uncertain in the world at the moment?
Absolutely, yeah. The uncertainty is the one driver in regards to, you know, what's going on, what could impact us, what could impact that situation. At the same time, the knock-on values of that. So certainly, yeah, I do see it rising.
You're thinking it's going lower. I'm assuming you think that it's already priced in.
I do think it's going to go a fraction lower, potentially. What can mess up my forecast on that? Well, we've seen, outside of the stuff that you really can't account for, like things developing in Syria, this is stuff that you can't really plan for at all. The EU Commission announced on Friday that they were shifting their targets for storage fullness over the balance of winter, unexpected, and more development on that is possibly more likely. Q1 is currently forecast to be relatively mild. That can change. We could see a real increase in demand over the balance of winter. So there's far more tangible things that could mess up my forecasts than geopolitical explosion.
Right, okay. Is that the same for you as well then?
Yeah, very similar. I think the weather is going to have such a large swing on pricing this year. So a few different forecasts in the market suggest that by the end of winter, which is the 31st of March 2025, that there's going to be around about 30% storage in European gas storage facilities. And we had a very cold snap a couple of weeks ago, so that forecast is probably revised down now. If the weather continues to be cold, we could move even further below that. Maybe if you see a 1 in 10 winter, 15, 20% full. that could see prices been really strong, particularly for next summer and next winter. Just for reference as well, coming into this year, so the 31st of March 2024, storage levels in Europe were around about 60%. So that's the spread we're looking at.
Okay, that sounds great, but what does that mean for their customers?
Well, it means that there is higher demand for gas, particularly in summer next year. So in Europe, we fill storage in the summer season and we withdraw in the winter season. Just a little interesting piece at the moment is that in the UK, the summer 25 MBP contract, which is April to September, is above the winter 25 price, October to March. And there's a lot of seasonality in the UK. In terms of gas, we don't have that much industrial demand compared to other European countries. So we get a lot of seasonality based on domestic heating. So to see the summer price above the winter is a really strange situation. We've seen it once before from the data I've looked at, and that was 2022, when we know what happened. There was a lot of stuff going on with the loss of the Russian gas, basically. So that's the situation we're in.
As you're sitting on the hedge, it doesn't matter what's going to mess up your forecast.
No, well, exactly. No, I mean, I take a slightly different view to certainly yourselves because I'm pricing predominantly contracts. So I care less about the prompt and what's happening in the markets today and whether it's cold or not. Yes, it has an impact, but as most of my contracts are now starting in 2025, I don't care too much about what's happening in this winter as much. And every month which I go forward, it becomes less of an issue. For me, it's much more focusing on actually what's going to happen across 25, 26, 27, maybe beyond that, as I mentioned earlier. And when you start looking at, yes, commodity will go up and down. There's a lot of macroeconomic things which could affect it. But I'm starting to focus actually more on other areas. So, for example, all the tax rises which are going into the businesses at the moment, you know, from the latest budget and national insurance, what's that actually going to do from a spend perspective for them? And how is that then going to impact it? You know, less demand would equal less cost, but actually it's because there's less ability to pay. So I'm starting to think this bigger picture around actually how is it going to outplay over the next few years? You know, will businesses continue to be ongoing viable businesses, or actually they're going to start struggling as they go? And how can I help support them in that journey? You know, do I need to do something a bit different? Do we need to do more flexible contracts and offer it to different things so you're passing through the costs rather than fixing it completely? You know, it's a tricky one, but it's one where, as I said, I take that slightly longer view because that's what I know most of my customers are signing up to right now.
Okay, let's move this on. So there's quite a lot of companies here that are working for their customers, try and get them the best energy prices, not necessarily the cheapest, but what works best for them. I suppose the question they'll probably want to ask is where, we've talked about the next 6 months and longer term, but what should they be doing for their clients now? If clients are looking for contracts now, or maybe they're going to be looking in a year's time, what are the things they should be thinking about to help their customers? I'll start with you now again.
Thanks. No time to think there. I mean, it's tricky, so we can't, as a group, give any permanent advice around is it going up, is it going to go down, are things going to get cheaper or more expensive? I mean, just looking around this room, there was a very mixed bag about who said what. So you can't go, this is the perfect time to buy. All you can do is lay out, these are the things which should be affecting your decision making. The war in Ukraine is a good example. What's going to happen when Labour announces the industrial strategy? Is that going to drive things up or down? My guess would be, and it's only a guess, but it'll drive costs up because actually they're going to start saying we need to invest more in the infrastructure, and so that's going to start passing through. I don't know that, but I can say to any customer I'd speak to, something for you to consider. I would go along that line, I think, around how you can best do it. We don't know the future, but we are still trusted experts, and so therefore we need to give our expert opinion.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry. Anyone else?
I think the advice that we generally give to customers is we can't forecast where prices are going to go accurately. Anyone can do that. You could have 4 different forecasts and they all say completely different things. The market's forecasting it now. It shows a price curve. Customers who are exposed and want to have some long-term security should be actively watching that. Have a strategy that takes into account as longer dated period as possible. Bear in mind where your budget is and where the market is. If it's within your budget, then think about taking action. If it's not, then be prepared for it to be outside of that budget. be actively watching it, I think, is the best advice that we can give.
Yeah, it's kind of touching on that as well. It's kind of no advice is good advice, because it's down to the TPI if they want to try and hedge. And especially businesses these days, they might want to lock in those contracts for next year, because once they lock those contracts in, they know when that contract starts, they use that amount of energy, that is going to be in their budget. Now, what they can do is forecast that and say, well, we could see, and we could get it slightly cheaper, but what happens if it goes up? We've seen what happened in the past, where unfortunate businesses have massively been burnt. Unfortunately, some have gone under due to the fact of the energy. But in today's society, we can't really tell anyone in regards to what's going to be happening, especially as we keep on touching base on it. But geopolitical, it's, how long's a piece of string? Is something going to happen? Is it not? And it's really to take that sort of chance of saying, will we leave the business wide open in regards to renewing closer to the time? But when you're closer to the time, that's it. That's the price, and you're stuck with it. Or, plan ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go.
I was only going to speak because I feel obligated because the other three have, but I do have something additional to say is that the customer themselves has their own risk profile and risk appetite, and we cannot, as a supplier, dictate that to the customer. So again, a very similar answer to the other three, but just that additional point.
Okay, we're talking about commodity costs, but obviously you've mentioned non-commodity costs. You're factoring that, you're doing lots of work on the policy side, I'm assuming that. How can clients alleviate that? Is there any way they can alleviate non-commodity? I'll start at that end.
I was happily going to step out of that one.
Yeah.
to be honest, I wouldn't even like to spring an answer, because I'm not actually aware of the answer, unfortunately.
Okay, I want someone brave enough to answer this, come on. Oh, he's desperate.
I'll do it. Non-commodity is tricky, to say the least, and the rules keep on changing to some extent. BSUOS has always been inherently risky. It goes up, it goes down. Suppliers have lost millions and millions over kind of a 2017, 2019 period. I remember that, all about Great Western Bootstrap and all that kind of stuff for those who know. But then Ofgem changed the rules and they made it a bit more stable. Great, okay, so we can price it in, there's less risk being put in, which will help the customers, great. And recently they've just changed it again. Now, that may be a better thing, it may not be, we're still kind of trying to understand it, but the point is that uncertainty creates risk, and if there's risk, you price it in. Because if you don't, then actually what's going to happen is you may become unviable at some point down the line. And that goes across everything. How much transportation and distribution do we need to build in? How is that going to play out? The big one in my head, and I sent it earlier for those in the audience earlier, is MHHS. All electricity contracts which you're signing now will be a half-hourly contract by the time which it comes to the end of that contract. How do we price that in? Because right now, I know what my non-half-hourly costs are going to be. I don't know what my non-half-hourly because they're going to be half-hourly costs afterwards. Will some of them have to pick up capacity charges? A minority will, but we're not going to price that in right now, and we're, essentially locking in these prices. For me, there is a lot of risk as you look forward, and it's very hard to pass it through. Again, I think to your point, if you can give your customer certainty about the price over a period of time, actually that's a really strong message for them. It helps them budget, it helps them work out what they're going to do. I don't want to say whether a 1-year contract's better than a 3-year contract or anything else, because that's very specific to that customer. But actually, that's the type of conversation you should be having, saying, yes, there is more risk inherent in the market. It's going to get more as you go forward, so you need to make sure you have something which you're comfortable with, ideally probably for the right amount of time, recognising that when you come up for renewal, it could be a very different world.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I'm all right,
Can I ask, actually, the audience, and have a little bit of participation, what do your clients want? Do they want certainty on prices, or do they just want cheap prices, or do they want both? You can shout at me, you can do whatever you want. Certainty. Certainty is the main thing, is it? You want free energy. Okay, I'm sure there's a tariff at the weekends with some company. I don't know which one. I'm gonna do it a different way. These guys obviously want you to help them with their customers. Can the TPIs help you to do your job better?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I
want more than that.
Yeah, no worries. Demand forecasting is obviously inherently risky. Understanding the customer's profile, how they're going to consume, will be massively helpful to make sure we buy the right amount of energy at the right time, going out over the right period of time. Again, If we move to half hourly, that becomes even more granular. So having a better understanding will actually mean that we can do that. The less risk which we have to price in, because the better understanding we have of customers, the better price the customers get. And that goes across the whole industry. And that's where we probably need to continue working more and more, because the better which we understand our customers, the better we can offer the price.
Surely you've done some of that work already?
Some. It's very hard though. Taking that MHHS example, we don't know everything about the customers. Some of them don't even have smart meters yet. So
Okay, that's a fair point. Yeah, okay,
how
that's a fair
are
point.
you going to deal with that? You can do some stuff from demand forecasting. I'll be honest, these guys are going to be experts better than I am, but you look at the historical performance of that customer and you kind of get a sense of what they're going to do. COVID kind of messed it up a little bit. And then you had the commodity crisis after that. That's messed it up a little bit. So customer behaviour and how they've actually consumed don't necessarily align to historical patterns. And then on top of that, we've got all these concerns and the business sentiment, which is rapidly decreasing since the last budget. How are we going to take that into account? Are they going to start reducing their consumption? General rule of thumb is for a business that when it's tough times, they focus more on cost reduction, and when it's good times and more of a booming economy, they focus more on revenue increases and trying to do that. So there's a few things which you have to take into account as you look into this.
Andrew, anything to add?
I think perhaps not making my life or my job easier, but perhaps for the customer. The UK power market is rubbish. It's illiquid at the best of times. It's difficult to see prices until later on in the morning. I think perhaps coming into, I focus on flex contracts, so I can't really comment on fixed, but coming into transacting within a flex contract realistically and working with us as like a flex transaction team to actually get you done better in the market would probably help your customer manage their risk. It's illiquid, spreads are wide, so work with us and we can try and show you a better market.